Oh, this is going to be tricky, isn't it? Hello, home bakers, and welcome. It's Sourdough September, a month where we can make sourdough, enjoy it, and celebrate the wonderful thing that is sourdough bread for all you sourdough lovers out there. If you get your Home Bakers Bulletin from me, a weekly email containing everything that I do in a week in your inbox every Thursday, absolutely for free, you'll have seen a request a couple of weeks ago for some of your sourdough problems. In the hope that I can share some experience, a little bit of knowledge perhaps, or suggest something that you might like to try to help to fix your problems and take your sourdough bread to the next level. You responded with a tsunami of emails, a sourdough tsunami, if you will. Some questions, some dodgy looking loaves, and some of you just simply sharing what you've learned. Writing in with your own experiences and discoveries to help everyone else. Isn't that wonderful? So get the kettle on, because I have no idea how long this video is going to be. Get yourself comfortable and we'll embark upon a sourdough journey together, shall we? Let's roll the theme tune and I'll do the best I possibly can. Shall I? Roll it! Lines are now closed, so please don't send me any more sourdough emails because there's so many. Let's start. Michelle McCartney Philgate, hello, says, "Hi, I love your videos." Thanks. "They've made such a difference for me making bread. I especially love your stuff on sourdough, which is what I most frequently make. Bit of a puzzle, all of your other bread recipes work exactly as listed in the recipes. But with your basic sourdough, I have found I've had to reduce the water by 20 grams. No matter what bread flour I use, I get good organic hard flour as it's known here. I know that flour here in Canada differs from the US and also Europe, but I remain mystified about why for this one recipe I've had to adjust the fluid, even though I use the same flour in all my other bread. I'm pretty sure it isn't my starter, as I made it using your recipe, and it's now at least 3 or 4 years old and enjoying life at my house." Nice. It also has nothing to do with humidity or temperature of my house, as this happens whatever the weather. My fluid adjustment works just fine. It's no biggie, but I'm curious why this happens to this one specific recipe. After all, you did ask for questions. I sure did. Maybe that was a mistake. Thank you for all your hard work and your wonderful teaching. Michelle, Toronto, Canada. Hi Michelle, this is an interesting one since it's only the sourdough recipe where you have to reduce the water. The reason could be that in sourdough recipes, including my own, there tends to be more liquid in the recipe, making it for a more liquid dough, because that helps with fermentation. Fermentation happens in a more liquid environment, and that's why sourdough is often kind of loose and wobbly in the dough itself. That's where my head goes if you are reducing only the water in the sourdough recipe and not other bread recipes that you're doing. Perhaps that minus 20 grams of water is what it takes to make the dough manageable for you, and that's okay. If it's too wet, if it's too loose, I would always recommend taking the water down a notch to make it manageable for you, and then maybe bringing it up later or keeping it exactly the same depending on what you're comfortable with. That's my best guess. I hope that helps. Just Liz says, "Hi Liz, I got the anniversary scraper, got the new razor blades," nice one, thank you very much, "from the shop, but it's not a thing of beauty. Now I'm finally getting the rise I really like it to look better so I can gift them." Let's have a look at your picture, shall we? Oh! Check it out. This loaf is a roaring success. Look how much it's puffed up. I can see what you mean. It's puffed up beautifully, hasn't it? That's a massive win. It's erupted from the middle when some people struggle to get that kind of burst. However, I see what you mean. It's bursted. It's almost bursted a little bit too much. You look at the size of the burst, the way it's popped out, and that kind of layering kind of effect on where the burst is itself, it makes me feel like you could have proved it up a little bit longer. It is risen beautifully. But sometimes it just takes a little bit extra time for the puff to kind of not subside, but just for the structure to become one so that the puff happens more evenly. Does that make sense? My guess for this one, next time, leave it for a little bit longer before you bake it. Perhaps could be the case that you get out of your fridge, if you're using my method recipe, and leave it on your kitchen side for a few hours just to let it come up a little bit further. It's got too much tension in the middle, and that's what's busting it out like that. It's a fine balance between too much tension and not enough tension, but there's just a little bit too much there. You can tell by the way that middle has just kind of pushed itself out to such a degree. Hope that helps, Just Liz. Ashley King says, hi Jack, I've been following your sourdough bread and starter instructions from your book and I've been happy with my loaves. Thank you. You're welcome. Apologies for the length, but I thought more details than less might be helpful. Always helpful to give me more detail than less. I use a round Dutch oven and follow in the baking instructions from your Dutch oven video and wait hours or even until the next morning before I cut into my bread, which sits on top of corner racks for the airflow. Each time I can't tell if the slightest feeling of dampness from my bread, if there is something wrong, or if it's exactly what I should be seeing, as it hasn't had time to lose moisture and go stale. I've put the loaf back into the oven directly on the racks for a few minutes immediately after taking out the Dutch oven and haven't noticed a difference. Sounds hollow when tapping, exceeds 208 degrees Fahrenheit. What is that? 97.7 degrees C, that should be fine. My apartment temp is in the low 70s F and the fridge is at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, that's fine as well. I wonder if I'm not leaving it in the oven long enough or proving it too long, too warm during a pre-fridge folding. Still tastes great though. Now, what is the problem here? Ooh, picture looks nice. Too much moisture in the crumb. Okay, sourdough breads, because they ferment for so long, retain more moisture in the crumb when you bake them. And some people love that sticky kind of tackiness. However, there is a level where it just becomes kind of damp, kind of pappy in your mouth, which I don't particularly like. Some people really do. What I would suggest in this scenario is perhaps it's fermenting a little bit too much for your taste before you bake it. 38 Fahrenheit, let's just check that fridge temperature, shall we? 3.3, yeah, that's fine. You said in here, I wonder if I am proving it too long or too warm during pre-fridge folding. It still tastes great though, yes. So if that's your suspicion that you're leaving it too long before it hits the fridge, it could be the fact. You might be leaving it too long and it fermenting a little bit too much for your taste. So cut that back first. That's what I would start with. Cut back that fermentation time before you hit the fridge because it might just be going a little bit too much. Way back in the olden days, we used to make sourdough bread in a class. Together in one day, I'd mix the dough super early in the morning. When we got to put it in the fridge, instead of just shaping up into the basket, putting it straight in the fridge until tomorrow, we didn't have the following day. So we would shape it up, leave it in the basket for an hour to puff up, and then put it in the fridge for an hour before we all baked our loaves. That resulted in a nice loaf of sourdough bread with a beautiful burst on the top that was nice and puffy. We didn't have as much as that stickiness and as much of that tackiness because it wasn't left to ferment overnight. So try a same day sourdough. It might be more to your taste than the sticky kind of pappy one that you're making. Thanks, Ashley. Russell Gilbert says, hi Jack, I'm a pandemic baker, but I've never gotten past the sourdough starter stage. Loose definition of the word baker. You've not actually baked anything. I need a bulletproof method for making a starter so I can make that elusive first loaf. I feel like I'm doing what everyone says to do, but after multiple attempts, the starter always ends up appearing dead after several days of promising growth. Fascinating, I love this. Back to the very basics, please. Thanks, Russell in Dallas. There's another one here from Jackie Dixon that says, my starter always goes flat after 4 days. I've tried 4 times with the same result. I follow directions to a T, live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Interesting note, this one says, my starter always goes flat after 4 days, whereas Russell's email said, my starter always ends up appearing dead after several days of promising growth. Yes! Starter's not going to puff forever. Yeah, the reason why a sourdough starter puffs is because it's got natural yeasts present inside of it. All a sourdough starter is food. It's made out of flour and water, right? So the flour is food for the natural yeasts in the grain, in the air, whatever. All it is a food source and a home for natural yeasts. And we know the yeasts are alive and eating because when they are making bubbles, and bubbles is what we want in the dough. Bubbles is what we want out of our yeast. That is literally this reason for this purpose. To put bubbles into our dough and puff it up. Natural yeasts, right? When it runs out of food, the natural yeasts don't eat. And if they don't eat, they don't make the bubbles. So at some point, if your starter's shown signs of puff, it will eventually run out of food, and so will appear to either not make any more bubbles or start to collapse or look like it's dormant, because it is dormant because there's nothing to eat. Okay, a lot of people ask me when they're making their starter, it might take 4 kind of days to make the starter, or maybe 5. And at some point during that time, the yeasts and the starter start making bubbles, but then it subsides. This is the natural life cycle of your starter. It's not going to puff up forever and just keep foaming away forevermore, because at some point those yeasts are going to run out of food. So here's what you do. If your starter was making bubbles at some point, that means it's a great success. Just because it's not doing it anymore, it doesn't mean that it's over or you've done it wrong or it's time to throw it in a bin. It just means it needs a little bit of food. I rarely recommend throwing anything away when you're making starter, but sometimes it may be necessary. Scoop out the majority of your starter, just leaving what's clinging to the outside of the jar and then giving it a big feed ready for your bake. If you need 200 grams of starter to bake it tomorrow, you put flour and water into your jar, 100 grams of each, making 200 grams. The following day, with the yeasts given some food to feed off of, it will puff up ready to bake. But you need to get rid of some of the volume first. If it made bubbles once, it will make bubbles again. Trust it. If it made the bubbles, you won the game already. I hope that makes sense. That seemed like a rather garbled answer, but I hope it made sense. Your starter needs food, fresh food. If it's not making bubbles, it's run out of stuff to eat. So give it something. Hope that helps. Thanks, Russell, and thank you, Jackie. I'm so pleased that somebody sent that in, because it's such a common problem that people perceive that they have, but actually they don't have a problem at all. Cheryl from Vancouver Island. That sounds exotic, doesn't it? British Columbia. Is it? I don't know. Please forgive my ignorance of the places of the world. I haven't been to many. I've been on this sourdough journey for 2 years. Having started by watching your sourdough series, I would like to correct having a dense 1 centimetre layer along the bottom. Okay, a dense 1 centimetre layer along the bottom of the loaf. My goal is to have a lacy, even crumb with an ear. Thank you, Jack. Let's have a look at this picture. It's so interesting when I read what people have written and then we'll look at the picture. A dense 1 centimetre layer across the bottom. I was expecting like a Play-Doh kind of raw layer that maybe perhaps hadn't been stone baked, and that's why it was underbaked on that bottom layer. It looks like it has been stone baked. If it hasn't been stone bake things please, it's better. There's a reason why people do it. The immediate heat underneath will help it to rise evenly, certainly on that bottom part. It looks like you have been though. I kind of see what you're talking about. It's very slight. At risk of sounding patronising, I don't look closely enough at these things. I don't look at them and go, oh, I wish I could fix that bottom 1 centimetre layer. Ooh. It's obviously a problem for you. What am I saying? Stone bake stuff if you're not stone baking things. That will help you out. A lacy crumb with an ear. Thank you. All right, here's what I can suggest in this part. I told you this video is going to be tricky, didn't I? There are things we can do with ingredients and there are things we can do with equipment when it comes to sourdough baking that I can suggest, like baking on a stone, for example. There are techniques we can use in terms of folding and in terms of using steam for baking and things like that, which we'll probably no doubt touch upon along the way. And there's also this kind of very grey, very hard to explain, impossible, kind of invisible thing, which is your own physical instincts and the way that you feel and the way that you handle and the way that you hold and the way that you fold things. The essence of your fingertips. And when we're in class, all the bread comes out and it all has the characteristics unique to the person who baked it because of the essence of their fingertips. This doesn't look like a problem in terms of the first things I was talking about, ingredients, equipment, technique. It looks like a problem of the way that you handle things. Is this making sense? Oh dear. When we're folding up sourdough, when we're handling it, it's constantly in a state of puff. From the minute we mix it up with our starter to the minute we put it into the basket. Even in the fridge, it's constantly slowly puffing up until it hits the oven. And all along the way, we try and treat it with a kind of delicate touch. Yes, we are in charge. We are deliberately folding it and turning it and re-strengthening it, but we're constantly using a delicate touch so that all our movements have this kind of consistency to them. The dough has a kind of consistent texture from start to finish, and we're not kind of knocking out the air bubbles as we go along. We are gently there to encourage the dough to form strength and a nice shape while it continues to do what it does the best, which is ferment, develop flavour, structure and puff, having us giving it time. What I would suggest here is approach your dough with a delicate touch in all of those moments, because it's that kind of inconsistency that has the potential to form areas of tightness and other areas of lightness. And I hope that makes sense without becoming too much of a worry. I'm not trying to give you other things to worry about while you're doing it. Everything there looks like a great success. Everything's puffed up and that's half of the game already, and you can make a sandwich and toast and it's wonderful. The last thing I want to do is to fill your head with worry and tension while you try to build tension in your dough without knocking out the bubbles. I hope that helps you a little bit, Cheryl. I really hope it does. Carry on doing what you're doing, because it looks like you're smashing it to me. Stuff like this often goes away over time as you become more confident and more at one with the structure and the nature of your dough. Lorna Mahoney. Hi Jack, how long can you leave your starter after feeding using the scrapings method? Occasionally I have fed mine and then couldn't make bread with it the next day due to other commitments. Is it possible, and will it still work after 2 days? Your starter, yes, if you catch it at the right point and you put it in the fridge. So ideally what I would do is I'd feed my starter in the evening, it would puff up at room temperature overnight, nice and tall, and I'd get up in the morning and see it's puffing and go, yes, go ahead and make my dough. Sometimes, yes, there are moments where I'm like, oh wait, I've woke up late, or something like this. Something's gotten in the way and I can't make my sourdough today, and I think, oh no, crumbs, this is annoying. I would instinctively put it straight into the fridge, because putting it in the fridge slows down the puff, slows down the fermentation, and more often than not, I would approach it again the following day probably and everything would be okay. I don't know how long you could get away with that for. The longer you leave it and the higher it was when you put it into the fridge, the further along that fermentation cycle, the sleepier it's going to be when it hits your final dough. So what I would instinctively do is I would leave it a day, use it out of the fridge, and probably everything would be okay. I would be a bit wary of leaving it longer than that without giving it another feed. So likely, to avoid throwing anything in the bin, I would probably feed it again that evening and make double the amount of loaves the next day. Or get rid of the excess, use it up as discard, which is a term I really don't like, in some other kind of yeasted bread maybe for the meantime, and then approach my sourdough starter and feed it and actually do it the next time. I don't mind messing stuff up at home. It is a long process. I don't mind getting to the end and have a substandard bread and be like, meh, but you might, and I don't want to advise you to do something that might lead to that disappointment. So maybe just sack it off and then try to do it again another time. Hope that helps, Lorna. Thanks for getting in touch. Josephine says there's a problem. Here's a problem, loaf. What did I do wrong? Thanks, Josephine. Let's have a look, shall we? Can't wait to see it. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, Josephine. I'm laughing. It's probably not funny for you. If you get to this stage of the sourdough process, leave it to cool, cut it open, and this is what you've got inside, I'm really sorry about that. That must suck for you. This is interesting, isn't it, with all my experience of making bread at home for the last... There are some things I can't explain because there's some things that have never actually happened to me. However, let's have a close look and see what's going on here. There's a Thai crumb here. That piece on the right looks really dense and almost like dough. Just that middle spot of that piece on the right. There are some gas bubbles, which means something was happening, but not enough. It's held a nice shape. So if it fermented too much, I would imagine it would kind of spread and flop and be dense. But it's got a nice shape and it's dense. A big massive chasm has opened up on the underneath. There is some kind of burst on the top. It could be because of that volume that is created underneath that's created that burst on the top. You are stone baking by the looks of things, or perhaps in a Dutch oven, which has burnt the bottom, and it will burn the bottom because there's nothing to protect it. It's just a thin layer of crispiness. My suggestion here is that your starter wasn't bubbling enough before it went into the dough. Oh my goodness, not enough fermentation has occurred. Maybe it was a cold day that day, and while your starter was bubbling, you made your dough and it just didn't puff up. And I instinctively would have probably picked up on that along the way when I was folding. When you hit the stages of folding, I would have at some point looked at it and gone, oh, this isn't very puffy, maybe I'll leave it for longer. This definitely comes down to experience and practice, which you can't replicate, you can't get around. That's necessary. But within that, what you can do is make sure you're observing along the way, observing what your dough is doing and how it feels like. You might start to get some sneaky suspicion as you continue your sourdough journey that this time things aren't quite as they were last time. It's all part of building your instincts. It's all part of practice. What you have got here is probably a good foundation for crisp breads. To slice it really thin, drizzle it with olive oil and salt, put it in the oven and make a whole ton of crisp breads. Keep it in a Ziploc bag and you can just dip into that whenever you want. Dip into a nice bit of tzatziki or hummus and it'd be wicked. I hope it hasn't put you off. I understand it's a long process. Keep doing what you're doing. You will start to get a sense of when things are right and when they're not quite right. My suspicion here hasn't fermented enough. Whether it's in your starter or in the dough, whether it was a cold day, I don't know. It hasn't fermented enough. There's not enough activity and bubbles going on in there. That's why it's dense and doughy. That big chasm underneath, it's likely just a result of whatever heat it's been in contact with underneath. I hope that helps you for next time, Josephine. Thank you very much for sending your snap. John Rose, hey Jack, my mum used to say that when your ear is burning, that someone is talking about you. True. Well, now my sourdough ear is burning. Pictures attached. It's a nice ear, but burnt, and I can't catch the person talking about my sourdough. I bake at 230 degrees fan in a Dutch oven for 25 minutes, lid on, and 220 degrees C fan for 25 minutes, lid off. I read on the internet to cover the air in foil when it's the right colour, but I worry about taking the whole thing out of the oven and the oven cooling down. Suggestions appreciated. Let's have a look at your picture. Ooh, wow. Look at that. That is lovely in every sense. Nice work. Okay, Rosie boy. I'm saying that because that's how you signed off your email. I don't just give people nicknames for a laugh. I'm not that guy. All right, Rosie boy, well done. This looks amazing. Yeah, the burnt ear thing. Yeah, some people pride themselves on a burnt ear. You go to like some kind of Camden Town bakehouse in London and there'll be like burnt ears all over the place because they don't care. They need the heat to get to puff up, yeah? And the caramelisation sometimes can be considered perfection. I've had conversations with professional bakers that consider the black top rim on the ear to be absolute bread perfection because it just shows how the caramelisation of the crumb is absolutely spot on. The caramelisation is a sign that the fermentation within the bread dough itself is absolutely perfect. If you don't want it, well then it's a problem for you. Personally, I would just eat it. Not that black either. Yeah, follow the advice you found online and put a bit of tinfoil over that ear when it's reached a nice colour. You'll be okay. Just opening the door. Perhaps when you remove the top off your Dutch oven, you can do it then. You're probably going to have to crinkle it up, aren't you, if you've got a fan oven, because it might just blow the whole thing away. But you should be all right. It's not like a cake where it's just going to immediately collapse. Plus, in the Dutch oven, you're going to have the heat from underneath as we are pushing up inside. So give it a go with the tin foil, man. It will probably work. Don't worry too much about opening the oven. And thanks for your hilarious email. Leslie Flash. Basically, there are no problems with sourdough if you use your recipes and advice. Thanks. And I bless your name regularly. All right, okay. I'm working on taking compliments better. I'm not very good at it. Your expertise has been foundation to our lives. Oh, it gets better. You should be recognised nationally for the hero that you are. So awkward. However, 3 things about which I'm curious in case you're short of problems, though I imagine you've been deluged by suggestions, correct? Let's go. Problem 1. I use hardcore ship-to-mill white and wholemeal flour to make 2 loaves at a time. Because it works better for me, I divide the dough after the first stretch and fold and work with 2 balls of dough side by side. Nice. That's actually quite pleasing to do as well, isn't it? To have 2 balls. You can fold them both. Double the practice. Before I begin the second folding, each piece of dough looks like a half moon. The long side being the cut side. Everything goes well until the 6th fold, by which time I often have a pleated tongue of dough sticking out of the ball that when I fold it over just will not let me make a decent sphere. That persists throughout the rest of the process. Usually one ball of dough behaves and the other doesn't, and I can't work out why. In fact, it makes very little difference to the end result. There are always two decent and very delicious loaves, but one slightly better than the other, and over time my hands are learning how to eliminate the difference. There may be a principle involved, but I will only discover that through experience. I can't intellectualize it, so I wondered if you already knew. It sounds like you haven't got a problem because the problem goes away and your loaves come out really nice. One's slightly better than the other. And you've also answered your own question here because you said, and this is a really nice part, over time, my hands are learning how to eliminate the difference. Maybe what I talked about earlier, about the essence of your fingertips. This is what Leslie is sharing with us all. I can't intellectualize it. Okay, yeah, I understand. Like putting it into words, you can't put it into words, right? Is that what that means? I wondered if you already knew. No, I tried to earlier and I think it was a car crash, but hopefully it helped some people out. Next one, after most of the day and night in the fridge, the skin on top of the dough when turned out for baking is quite tough. Interesting. So you turn it upside down like this and get your dough out of here. The skin, this part, the bit that is previously inside of the basket, is quite tough. I can make a central slash with a sharp blade, but anything fancy, okay, or just with a slightly duller blade, just snags and tears. Yes, no, it will do, that's right. Again, perhaps a principle, something blindingly obvious involved. Makes zero difference to the baked bread. Yes! Slashing with a grignette is really about confidence. Whether you're just doing one slice across the middle or multiple slices or creating something incredible, it's all about the confident cut and getting used to how the blade actually performs the cut inside of your hands. Practice, practice, practice. I feel like this whole video is going to be like, get some practice, guys. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Get some practice, yeah? When sourdough comes out of the fridge and it has that thick skin on the outside, that's what holds a nice shape, and that's also what encourages the cut, the burst, if you will, to burst open in the place where you've cut it. It's the differentiation between that tough outside layer and the moist inside that allows that bit to expand and the other bit not to expand, and it also makes a nice foundation for when you are slicing with a grignette. Because it is tougher, it's no longer kind of sticky and soft, you have some kind of resistance to the blade, so when you're performing your slices, you've got a real nice foundation to work with, and you can start making really nice delicate patterns with confidence. It does, especially with a straight blade. This one you can curve. This is the one that's on the website and you can curve it as well. I normally keep it straight these days. But if you're trying to make curved designs, it will kind of snag as you come around. That's just natural. It's tricky, isn't it? But keep practicing, keep making elaborate designs and using your blade nicely and seeing what you can and can't get away with in terms of the tightness of your curve, if that makes sense. And make sure you're having fun with it, you know, even with a snag and a little, where it catches, it can look really nice anyway. Make sure you're using a super sharp razor blade and be swift and confident with your actions. Little bits like that, it's quite nice to do. Visualize, and we've spoken about this before, about a start point and end point, and try and make the move as confident and swift as possible between those 2 points. Leslie's third and final question, is there any way to manipulate the timing on a starter? We are little old people. We go to bed and get up early. Good for you. Oh. So it is entirely feasible to mix the starter at about 6 p.m. and have the dough in the fridge by 11 o'clock the next day. But sometimes I would like to have the morning more flexible or even free. And aside from staying up way past my bedtime to make the levain, I can't see how to do it. May you go from strength to strength, dear boy, and live securely with your family to the end of your days. Wow. Thank you, Leslie. Yes, it's all about temperature. Leave it in a cool place and it will last for longer. If you want to, and some people do, they draw markers, don't they, on here, and they follow the hours, obviously you're sleeping, they follow the hours to see when it is at its peak and when it is not. That means when it's gone as far as it will go and then when it all starts to subside. And you can do that if you want to really get a grasp of what your starter does and how it performs within the temperature of your home normally. From then you can cool it down. If you find somewhere cool to put it, sometimes the most reliable place to put it when like it's hot here now, it's hot. There's nowhere cool to put stuff. The only cool place to put stuff is in the fridge, and that's probably too cool for my starter to get excited. Sometimes overnight, I put it in the shed because it's cool outside overnight. And it might just be enough to help it last a little bit longer. Alternatively, what you could do is mix up your starter, leave it on the side overnight like you are doing, wake up first thing in the morning, stash it in the fridge, and come back to it a few hours later. Remember, it's going to be colder than it was, and so your dough might be colder to begin with, but it'll soon even itself out and it'll be fine. Just buy you a few extra hours. I hope that helps, Leslie. Thank you for your 3 questions, and I hope it helps. Thank you for your kindness as well. Some of you just got in touch with me to be kind to me without even a question, and that's really lovely. Thank you very much. Jane Watson, speaking about hot, it is hot in here, and I was going to put the aircon on, but it makes a noise, and so hopefully I don't look like I'm getting too hot, because I am. Jane Watson, hi Jack, hopefully you'll be able to explain what happened here. Photo attached. I can usually bake a pretty decent sourdough loaf using your recipe, however, every now and then this happens. Now I'm intrigued. From the outside the loaf looks great, cut into the hole at the inside, the loaf appears to have sunk to the bottom. Let's have a look. Oh, crumbs! That's a chasm and a half, isn't it? That is an undercrust chasm. Oh. So we have this area where there's a big hole at the top, don't we? This is the opposite of that loaf earlier, that big hole in the bottom, isn't it? And we have this other area on the bottom which has got some bubbles in it. Not a lot, but it's not as dense as that one earlier, is it? I think I know what's going on here, and a lot of people I've seen diagnose stuff like this, say, maybe your starter wasn't fully mixed within your dough, right? Like you hadn't mixed it up enough in the beginning, which I think is absolutely crazy, because in reality, once you've mixed your dough, once you've folded it up and how many folds, you have 3 different fold stages and pre-shaped it and shaped it, it's gonna be throughout your dough, let's face it. I don't think that is a problem. I think that is a cop-out. It looks like 2 things entered my mind. It looks like you're not baking on a stone. Correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like you're not, because the underside looks kind of pale, and you see the shape of it. It's kind of like an eye shape, where those 2 kind of corners of the eye, if that makes sense, have lifted from the, I think, tray, instead of remained flat to the stone and bursting out on the top. It is lifted, elevated itself up. I see this loads on tray baked breads. It's nice and toasty on the top, and it is not toasty underneath, which also makes me think that your oven possibly wasn't preheated enough, or is very, very hot on the top part and not the underneath. Often in electric ovens where you've got the warm element on the top, it just toasts off that top, which would explain that big chasm, because the heat on the top would make the yeast go crazy in that top part, also dry out that top surface and encourage that big chasm to form in there, where something is trying to rise and it rips away from the bottom, which isn't as hot as the top. It looks like something is going on here. If it was over fermented, I feel like it would be more saggy and it would have flowed more, but it hasn't done that. So my diagnosis is probably the same as the one earlier. There's not enough activity in your starter, and there's not enough activity in your dough, and to get a sense of that really does require practice and also observation of the dough as you go along. It says here that I can usually bake a pretty decent sourdough loaf. This is fascinating, because the language that people use really is all I have to go by in an email of a few sentences. Pretty decent means good by your standards, edible in my mind, puffed up nicely. This one being the exception, where this has just happened on this occasion. The outside, the loaf looks great, meaning probably looks in line with the rest of what you make, but the middle is the problem. Maybe on that day, you didn't preheat your oven enough, and so if it was an electric oven, the element would have gone on really hot, trying to heat the oven up and toast it off the top of your loaf. Maybe you rushed it in there, I don't know. That would be my guess. Something along those things that I've spoken about. I hope it fixes some problem, Jane. I really hope it does. Jean Simmons. No. Jean, thanks for your email. A 400-gram loaf made with Canadian strong white bread flour. Everything else, starter and method, is baked with Jack. How did the ear end up in the wrong place? And why the very large hole? I cannot wait. I love this. I can't wait to see it. We love your videos and are in awe of your skill and expertise. Stop it. Best wishes, Jean and Peter. Woo! Okay, look at that inside shot. For a minute, let's just look at the inside shot. That looks good. Obviously, there's a big, massive hole. But on the whole, it looks good. It looks fluffy. Positive signs first, okay? It's positive signs first. I always look at every single bread that I make with the positive signs first. Always, always, always. Right, let's go back to number 1. It is dark on the outside. It is really dark on the outside. And I know certainly, even I have in the past said, oh, the hotter the oven, the better, okay? When I taught bread making in people's homes all over the place, I, from the very beginning, began to realise that everybody's oven is different and some are drier than others. Theoretically, heat makes your loaf jump up, and so the more heat, the better the jump up. Not always the case if stuff dries out fast. It looks like this is a very hot oven that has dried out the outside and toasted it off like this, and it hasn't burst where it's cut because it's too dry, which could be because of the heat, could be because of the oven, could be because there's not enough steam. We didn't use steam at all. So in that sense, turn the oven down a little bit, use plenty of steam. That's the first thing I can suggest. The next picture is the underneath picture. Look at these crinkles, man. They are a thing of beauty. Look at those crinkles underneath. They're a thing of beauty. Bread always bursts where it's weakest. So if the top is being scorched by the heat of the oven and dried out at the same time, it's never going to burst on the top. It will always burst where it's the weakest, where it's normally where the moisture is. Or excessive joins and folds and seams and stuff like that. And it looks like this loaf has got this crinkled up structure on the underneath, which is going to be prone to weakness and also moisture buildup, which is why by where your thumb is there, if we look at the next picture, where your thumb is now not, is that turned around? Looks like it's turned around. Or is it a different loaf? Either way, it's busted open at the bottom, which is most of the time where the weakness builds up, because that is where the bread dough is in contact with the surface, and so the moisture hasn't really got very far to go. It'll build up there, keep that bit soft, and if it's already toasted on the top, it's going to burst open where it's weakness underneath. My suggestion is it looks like this has been stone baked, which is a massive win, well done. Perhaps next time heat the stone for longer on a high heat, turn the heat down for the actual baking part, make sure you use plenty of steam. Jean and Peter, I hope that helps you out. Thank you for sending me your picture. Thank you very much. Rory's email says, what water? What water? Hello, Jack. At home, we have our own water supply with no chlorine. What is that? Rain? What is that? Rainwater? Wonder what that is. That's interesting in itself. I took my sourdough starter to my apartment in Portugal and failed. I thought it was the flour until I tried using bottled water. Then sourdough made with every flour I had bought was a success. Lesson, do not use chlorinated water. Rory, P.S. I don't take pictures of my failures. Here's a picture of my success. Not in Portugal. Let's put your success up there on the screen, shall we, Rory? Boom. Look at that. Nice work, Rory. So Rory's lesson for us all is in the water, is in chlorinated water. And I've heard of this. Here in the UK, I always use water straight out of the tap. I don't have a problem. Like in this sourdough starter that I'm making at the moment, water straight out of the tap. Some countries, I'm aware, I hear about people going to America and the tap water tastes like swimming pool water because of the chlorine inside. Like there's more of it. And I begin to appreciate the water is different all over the world. So if you are having trouble, like Rory just had this problem out of nowhere, bing, and then started to twig that in his unique scenario where at home he has his own unchlorinated water supply, put 2 and 2 together, we can all learn a massive lesson from that. So thank you very much for sharing that, Rory. Nice one. If you are having trouble when you're using tap water, try bottled water. And if that doesn't fix the problem, rule it out. Rule it out. Try that. If it doesn't fix it, rule it out, move on, try something else. Nice one. Thank you, Rory. Esther, very much looking forward to sourdough September advice. I'm currently baking sourdough weekly and I have 2 very nice established starters, one full white and one rye one. I'm relatively clear when it comes to the process. I understand the intricacies of temperature. I turned one of my ovens into temperature control proving area and it seems to work. However, I have 3 major questions. First one, every time I watch videos, when the bread come out of the banneton, mine never stands up like that. It tends to spread. Not badly, as the bread does rise in the oven, but since no one around can judge my bread, I don't know what's coming out. Is okay. Since no one around me can judge my bread, I don't know if what's coming out is okay. Esther, judge your own bread. Do you like it? Yes, it's okay. Nice one. Before you say, I have checked. I have a strong starter, use the Pico Rise, do autolyze, 4 sets of stretch and folds and feels really good and strong. I'm only proving it 75%, so I don't overproof when I leave it in the fridge at 4 degrees C when I bake the next morning. Oh my goodness. Hydration ratio is 70%, so why, oh why does not my bread stand up taller when I turn out of the Balaton? Just makes me doubt the process. Esther, when I turn my dough out of the basket, it spreads. It may not be that evident on a video. Because remember, I'm here by myself, filming myself, and there's times where I've got to turn it out and I've got to go fiddle with the camera and come back and do something else. So you might not actually see the whole extent of the spread. And in class, I used to make a joke out of it. We used to be 10 people, including me, in a room. We all turn out our sourdough breads onto our pills and it all flows a little bit. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, I need to get in the oven quick, smart. And I'm like, it's all cool, guys. It's all cool. It will spread a little bit. We'll slash it, it might spread a little bit more. It'll hit the stone and then it'll jump up and everything will be fine. Some spread more than others in a room like that. You've got 10 people who are shaping the bread dough in their very specific, unique ways. Personal to them. Some of them are going to spread more than others, and that's down to building the tension. But if your loaf of bread's coming out though really nice and you like it, judge your own loaf of bread. Be your own judge. You already know the answers. You got it inside of you. Do I like this? Is it a sandwich? Yes. Okay, it's spread out a little bit. Who cares? Unless it's causing you a great big problem and everything's a pancake on the table when you spread it out. That's bad. If it's spreading a little bit, it's normal. Mine spreads out a little bit. The more water I put in, the more I try and get away with, the wetter that I make it just for a laugh sometimes, the more it spreads. But then hopefully it jumps up in the oven like yours does and everything is fine. It just makes me doubt the process. Don't doubt what you're doing. Enjoy your bread and enjoy the process. My second question is simple, I promise. Thanks. As I have a full-time job, I always wonder how long I can leave the dough in the fridge at 4 degrees C so I don't have to bake in the morning necessarily. This is fine, you can leave it in there for ages if you want. I don't know to the extent of it, and this is something that comes up a lot, and I always kind of fluff around the answer because I've never left it for ages to find out. But what I have certainly done is left it when I should have baked it in the morning, or where in theory I would have baked it in the morning, but baked it later on in the afternoon, 1 or 2 o'clock. There's also been instances when I've baked it in the evening, and there's also been instances when I baked it the following day. At each different point, you get a different loaf of bread in the end. Some might be tackier than the others. Some might rise up more or less than the other one, but each one is delicious in its own special way. So what I'm trying to say is that a baker will bake stuff at the same time every day probably and control things as much as possible, as much as they can, and respond to the nature of their dough, and their priority is the bread. For us as home bakers, we bake it when we can bake it, and if we can't bake it, we don't bake it, and this is how we learn. It may be that the one that you left for an extra day is the most delicious loaf of bread you've ever made, or you can find another purpose for it beyond making a sandwich. I don't know the extent of how long you can leave it for, but certainly in the afternoon or the evening the same day, or even the following day in the morning, everything will be absolutely fine. My third and final question is that I seem to overcook the bottom of the bread. When I don't, I seem to be undercooking the bread. I bake in a Dutch oven at 240 degrees for the first 25 minutes and another 20-25 uncovered, so that it seems to work for the bread and not the bottom. Any tricks you're aware of to stop this? This is a problem that I don't have, but it's a problem that I've seen. And lots of people ask me about it when the bottom burns. And here's a suggestion for you. It tends to be those Dutch oven people, the cast iron people, that are having that problem. And maybe the cast iron bottom is just too hot. Preheat it to a lesser temperature. Or some people, and it might be worth a try, some people don't preheat Dutch ovens. They just put it inside, give it a little spritz of water, and as the Dutch oven comes up to temperature, so too does the bread come up to temperature nice and slow and puffs up and makes a really nice rise. That's always worth a try. Is there an internal temperature the bread reaches when it's baked? Maybe I can judge by that. Some people say 95 degrees C, which is roughly 203 degrees Fahrenheit. You can probe the inside with an electric probe if you want to. If that's what you need to put your mind at ease that you've baked it enough, you can do that. Anyway, thank you for all your videos in the Home Bakers and the Bakers Club. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for being a part of it. All the best. Esther, thank you, Esther. I hope what I've said will help you out. I've turned the aircon on. I can't because I'm too hot. Okay, I hope it's not too noisy. This would be a nice learning curve for all of us. Next, Mike Mason. Problems with sourdough, smiley face. Jack, here's one for ya. Bread works fine, utterly reliable. I make mostly baguettes and occasional oval loaves. Sometimes rolls too. I use the wholemeal rye starter and about 25% wholemeal flour. I bake in the top oven of an Aga. I know it's rubbish for temperature control. That's fine. That's the beauty of an Aga. You don't have to worry about temperature control. I use a casserole with lid, Le Creuset, sponsor alert, for loaves, and old floor tile, sponsor alert, as a stone, and water in the base of the oven for baguettes and rolls. For the loaves, I use 20-22 minutes lid on, 20 minutes lid off. For the baguettes, I use 20-23 minutes in the top oven, whose temperature is around 220-240 degrees-ish. The problem is the crusts. My wife complains that they are not just crusty, but also tough. Woo-hoo! A material, but minor, fortunately, source of marital discord. This is also true when I bake yeasted breads. How do I get nice crusty crust, but not too tough? I am perennially jealous of those French boulangers that produce fabulously crusty, but light crusts. Yeah, I get it. Really look forward to an answer on this one. Mike Mason. Here's what I think is happening. From what you've told me, everything you're doing is not dissimilar to anything I've done here. The only thing, potentially, there's the wholemeal flour, but it looks like you're doing a mixture. Some stuff's white, sometimes rolls too. I use a wholemeal rice starter. Right, okay, so it could be the flour. Could be the fact that you're using 25 grams wholemeal flour across the board, if you are in fact using it across the board. If not, if you're using white flour just for your baguettes, for example, then there could be something else. From everything you've told me, everything you're doing is fine as long as you're using steam in the oven, which you are. Absolutely fine. Here's what I would say, as tricky as this might be, it may be as simple as your flour brand. I used to exclusively use one brand when I was doing classes in people's homes, and then started using another brand of flour. The first one made a bread with a denser crumb and a thicker outside crust, and the other one made for a lighter crumb, a crispy but very thin crust. First thing, and that is what I would try, Mike. That is what I would try. Change your brand of flour, because that is a massive contributor, probably the biggest contributor to the texture of your bread and to the characteristics of the outside area that is called the crust. Mike, I hope that helps you out and saves your marriage. If it does, let me know. Ron, hi Jack, hope the bruising is all healed up now. It has. I have a permanent dent, but no one can see it unless I point it out. My question is about keeping sourdough starter in good shape since I came on the course way back in 2019, I think. Nice, Ron! Ron! It would have been 2019 because after that there was like a bug going around for a while and all my courses went down the toilet. Nice one, Ron. Came to class in 2019. I've had no real problems making sourdough. Yes. However, I have had to remake my sourdough starter several times, even though I keep it airtight in the fridge when not using. I still find that sometimes it goes off, sometimes black around the edges, or I can just tell it's not right. So I'd love some tips on being able to keep it going successfully. Ron, it's so nice to hear from you 4 years later. It's really lovely. The more you use your starter, the more strength it will build to ward off these evil things. Make sure it's in something super clean, well clean to begin with. I have in the past had a starter that's grown like green and black stuff all over it, and I immediately throw it away if it makes me feel weird inside, if it starts smelling eggy or something strange. If it's acidic, it's fine. I think it's the acid that wards off all the evil spirits within your sourdough starter, but the more that you use it, the more resistant it will become to that kind of thing. So my suggestion here would be keep using it loads. Use it like once a week, twice a week if you can. Keep doing it, recycling it. I did a video as well before about how to keep your starter in tip-top condition, I think. And in that, you spoke about changing the jars to another super clean one, always wiping down the edges and keeping it nice and flat. And there's a few things in there that might help you out. I hope they do. But if any point, historically in the past, I've probably been a little bit relaxed about my own personal starter and when I choose to throw it away and when I choose to kind of scrape off the dodgy bits and keep using it. But in the world where I'm advised people all over the globe of what to do with their starters, you start to wonder about people's health. And so, if you get any of that weird stuff, start again. Have a look at that video that I mentioned. I'm going to find it. 169 is the video that you need, and hopefully that'll help you out. It's annoying, isn't it? But if you do have doubt, if it smells like nail polish remover, smells vinegary and acidic, it's all cool. If it starts feeling, if you start feeling weird about it, which is what I think you put here, I can just tell it's not right. Get rid of it and make a new one. But repeated use is probably the real true answer here. Hope that helps, Ron. Nice to hear from you. Thank you. I miss classes really bad, and I brought them back for a bit, and I know that it's healthy for me to be in a classroom full of people and to do more of that sort of thing. But a big part of me is terrified because it's been so long, and every time I get close to putting things back on, I freak out, I get cold feet and I tap out. That's enough of my emotional baggage. Next, Rosemary Dunning. Hi Jack, since I've switched to you many years ago, the loaves have been beautiful, sights to behold, with a great crusty split wave at the top and delicious. Oh, yes. Can we take a minute to clap up Rosemary, please? Thank you, please. Thank you very much. Lately, they don't split open properly and look like misshapen Canadian footballs, not soccer balls, or ugly slippers. I need a redo with your help. Love the dark rye starter. Never fails to get excited no matter how many weeks in between. Thank you so much, Jack, and the club is great. Rosemary. Rosemary, where are you in the world, I wonder? Canadian footballs could be a clue, couldn't it? Rosemary, if your starter is full of energy and excited like it sounds like it is here, then what I can suggest is that things are probably fermenting too much. If they don't beautifully bloom up and bust open in the middle like they used to, I would imagine things are getting a bit too fermented too much. Your yeast activity inside of your dough is starting to subside and the structure is beginning to break down a little bit. That would sure, without a picture, that would surely be the problem if in fact your final bread is kind of sad and a little bit dense, even though it is puffed up before you baked it. Perhaps in perhaps in Canada, or wherever it is you are, it's warm, like it is here at the moment. I don't know how the world works. I think it spins. Maybe it's flat. Is it flat? If it's warm where you are, it could be that it's just fermenting a bit too fast and a bit too much. Catch it and bake it a little bit earlier and have a play with timings, make notes as you go along. Always make notes as you go along. And that's when you'll find the biggest discoveries, I hope. I hope that helps you. Or should we keep going? What time is it? Oh, the battery's gonna go out. Let's change the battery and we'll just carry on, shall we? You can put the kettle on. This is brilliant, isn't it? I'm enjoying this. I hope you're getting some value out of it. I don't know. Well, I don't know. We've never done this before. Let's just... let's take a quick break. This is a good opportunity for me to tell you that I think we'll make a code for the Bake with Jack shop. If there's some sourdough bits and bobs you want to get, there's bundles on there, there's baskets, there's the this thing. What's that called? Sling to lower your dough into your Dutch oven, stuff like that. I will make a code. Let's make a code. Let's make a discount code. 15% off anything in the sourdough category from now until the end of sourdough September. And let's make the code sourdough sept 23. Sourdough sept 23 in capitals. Put that code into the Bake with Jack online shop and you can order stuff all over the globe. You get 15% off from now until the end of September. Let's do that. Why not? This is fun. Hi Jack, says Claire. Greetings from Camarillo in South California. First, I just want to say that you're awesome. Thank you in advance for your help with this problem. You're welcome. Thank you. I've been experimenting with a few things lately and I'm having trouble with getting a nice oven spring and ear formation. I'm not sure whether the problem lies of the different variables involved. One variable, here we go, I love this. Oh, this is long. Okay, so trouble with getting a nice oven spring and ear formation. We're talking about increasing volume in the oven by the sounds of things. One variable is that I really like high hydration breads, and so most of the time my breads are around 80% hydration. Should be fine, but they'll probably flow a little bit more. That might not be the problem, we'll see. Perhaps it's possible I'm not creating enough tension during the final shape. Yeah, that could be it as well. Or perhaps I need to add more stretch and folds during the bulk fermentation. That could be it as well. Yes, in a wetter dough it's going to be looser, so additional stretch and folds will only build additional tension, which will help to get a nice shape in the end and a nice burst on the top, theoretically. Another variable that may be contributing to or causing this problem is I am using fresh flour in some percentage, not all of it, okay, of my dough, because I mill my own flour using a mock mill. A mock mill, those of you do that at home, don't you? A little mock mill thing on your side, make your own flour. I've been using hard white wheat, hard red wheat, einkorn and spelt mostly. Sometimes sifted, sometimes not sifted. I start by adding a teaspoon of malted barley per 1,000 grams of flour to assist with the rise, but I'm not sure this has done anything. Oh my gosh, that's not one variable. That's like 25 variables. Another variable is I started using silicone pans. There's a massive lesson here for us all within variables that we'll come back to at the end of this. Started using silicone pans, including this one, instead of a banneton. It allows me to put the dough into the silicone pan following the final shape and without any use of flour, and then it goes right into the Dutch oven when it comes out of the refrigerator the next day. The dough doesn't stick to the silicone, and I don't get a loaf with a burned or chewy bottom like I used to. The Lecu brown silicone holder holds the dough nicely. This is fascinating, there's so much to learn here. Please don't go away, I know this is long. Holds the dough nicely, whereas the red ones don't have the same support. See the pictures, I usually make 2 loaves at a time. Okay. Big lesson we're gonna come back to after this bit. Let's have a look at these pictures. Wow. Right, baking in a Dutch oven. Noted. Milling your own flour. Noted. Loads of different varieties, all with different gluten structures and contributions to the texture and the strength of the dough. Noted. That is a variable. Additional water. Noted. Yeah, it's not my main concern. Silicon. Silicon things instead of. Have you seen these? Silicon things instead of banneton baskets, which you then take and place inside of the Dutch oven, bake and take it out. Okay, yeah. There's a lot of variables here, and that's the lesson we're going to touch upon later. But for this is a problem. This makes me... Here's what happens when you either stone bake or bake in a Dutch oven, a sourdough loaf that you proved up in a banneton basket. It's in the banneton, in your fridge, developing the outside skin that we spoke about before. Then you turn it out upside down onto your peel, which you then slash it and slide it onto something hot, a stone or the bottom part of a Dutch oven. The heat, yeah, makes it jump up. Not only that, but what you're putting it on is flat. The hot surface is flat. So you put the dough on top of the hot surface, and where you've scored it, it's going to want to rise up, and where the edges are, they're going to want to go like this. Am I in the middle? Like this. To accommodate for the big puff that happens in the middle. Like the very first picture we looked at, although that was to the extreme. Yeah? If you are baking in something like this, with sides, there's not going to be none of that. Because that is restricted by the sides. There's only one way for it to go, which is up. Which is why it's not bursting open on top, because there's none of this happening, there's only this happening. Also, in a banneton basket, you're getting the skin all around the outside of the dough, which holds a nice shape, and that's what helps our cut to open where we made the cut. Here, in silicone, it's going to be all sticky underneath. It's going to be soft and weakest underneath. That's where the big, massive expansion is going to happen, where it's the weakest, and that is why it's not bursting on the top. So whatever you're doing with your mock mill and your various different wheats that you are using, the shape of the loaf will be protected within that silicone mold, but it is the silicone mold that is stopping it from blooming beautifully and opening up nicely on the top. Not to say that you're not making nice bread, Claire, because you are. but that is your problem. And the big thing I want to touch on here is the amount of variables. If I can get it out, the amount of variables is huge. You've changed a lot of stuff here. And when anybody's learning about bread, that's cold. Changing one thing at a time is the way to really learn about stuff. There's loads of stuff going on here, so it's difficult to pinpoint, but look at those silicone molds. I got some silicone molds from the same website actually, for a laugh, and they've been here for a long time. Bagel molds. I keep meaning to make a video about why they exist. These things are really cool as well. Silicone molds make me, but they work for some people, and that's okay. I just wonder, in this scenario, there's a reason why people stone bake, why people use those covers in the steam, and why you bake on something hot, and to get all that to happen. And you're baking in the wrong thing to get those characteristics. I hope that helps. We are still going on this massive ride. For the 2023 Sourdough September special video, my gosh, this is going to cost me a lot for the editor to edit. So go to the shop and buy my things. Nita says, "Hi Jack, I'm so pleased to have found you on YouTube. Your starter recipe is the only one that has worked, and so quickly too. So thank you, you're welcome. The bread, however, is coming out quite dense, has lots of holes in it, smells and tastes great, but fairly hard crust. Also, despite using a really sharp knife or blade, it just doesn't cut it. Really sharp knife or blade, the cut just doesn't cut it. I guess you're talking about the cut before you put it in the oven. As you can see from the images, yes, I'm baking in a steam oven on a cast iron tava, which I usually use for making rotis. Click. All right, cool. That looks nice. That's a nice, handsome looking loaf. Has it been cut? What am I looking at here? Where's the cut? Is there a cut? Are you cutting through the surface? Has it cut but then kind of reformed itself? All right, here's what I think is happening here. I think it's very loose. I think it may have fermented slightly too much, although it looks like a great success. I wonder how hot your thing is underneath, but it looks pretty decent. It looks quite thick, so I'm assuming it's really nice and hot that you put it on, so they should get a nice jump up. It looks like it's just kind of flowed outwards, and the cut hasn't opened. So next time, try one of these Grignette, the old razor blade jobby, to make sure it's cut, make sure it's actually cut on the outside. You can see the inside and the outside. And also, there looks to be a problem here about shaping. What have you done with that paper? Have you lifted it out of something and put it on there? Looks like you've made handles. Lifted it out of something and put it on the flat thing. Are you proving in the Banneton basket? Maybe you're not proving in the Banneton basket, in which case you won't get that kind of outside skin. I also think there may be an issue. The bread looks great. It doesn't look over fermented to me. It looks great without seeing the inside, but the colour and even the shape of it leads me to believe that it's good bread in the end. There's no mention of it being gross. I think you need to work on building tension, both in the folds and in the final shape. And I hope that helps. It's as far as I can go with that one, but it looks like things are going well. Has lots of holes in it. It smells and tastes great. It's a hard crust. Practice, 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 practice. And develop your feelings for it and how you shape it and fold it. Nita, looks like you're doing all the right things. Keep doing it. It's probably the answer. Nick, oi, there's loads more. Oh my gosh, we have got loads more. Hi Jack, I've been baking sourdough for several years, but I feel a bit stuck. Oh, that's annoying. I'm trying to improve the texture and the rise of my finished loaves, but they always seem to lack the high time after. I feel like they spread too much when baking and don't pop up in the oven. Example, take the loaf on the right in the photos, noted. Let's put it here. I haven't seen it yet, but we'll put it there. Take the loaf on the right in the photos, larger, wider basket and crumb shot shown. It's light and aerated bread, but a little bit flat. Tried various things over the years to get height better, like kneading during the mix, more files with bright rods, but it feels like I'm not getting anywhere. The loaf on the right, let's have a look. Ooh, they look nice. Nick, you should be very proud of yourself. Oh, you've even done a little slashy up the side as well. You've done this cut and then you've done a little slashes on the side for decorative purposes. Oh, that could be a factor. Let's come back to that. Oh, these loaves look brilliant, Nick. So well done. You're doing really well. And you should be really proud of yourself, because to get to that point, like that looks like a loaf that I would make, and I would be really chuffed with it. I see what you mean about the flatness. Okay, Nick, here's what I think. Okay, the one on the right is in the wider basket, which is why it's flatter than the other one. Okay, that's why. Secondly, They are both kind of, they're pretty close. I guess in that cut shot is two different loaves, the cut piece of two different loaves, it looks like. Maybe it's not, maybe it's the same loaf. Either way, yes, I see what you mean about the flatness. Couple of things here. Yes, you've done those artistic scores down the side, and that would give your bread more opportunity to flow outwards as the surface area increases as it rises and as the cuts open out. If I was cutting a loaf to go sideways, I would cut it like that. or more like that, if that makes sense. That's the thing. If you just did the slash along the middle, you'd have less flow sideways. It sounds like you were trying a lot of different things to fix this problem. Kneading during the mix, more folds during the bite rise, increased tension in the pre-shape, lots of folds when shaping, proven for different times, etc. It feels like I'm not getting anywhere. I wonder if you're doing too much. I wonder if you're trying too much and folding too much and increased tension and all these other things, where the answer could potentially be to do less. Without me seeing how your hands are moving and how you approach the dough, it makes me feel everything here that you've written is about doing more. And I wonder if the true answer is just to step back and kind of do less. And in that sense, you will be handling your dough in such a way that you'll be disturbing the structure less. Does that make sense? And therefore encapsulating more air inside as you're doing what you're doing, and that encapsulated air is the thing that puffs it up nice and tall and big. Yeah, well, you need tension, but sometimes in trying to create more tension, you are disturbing the air that's already trapped inside, and sometimes it's the air bubbles that are already trapped inside that you're tightening that will help it to go up. Does that make sense? This is fascinating to me, and I hope everything that I've said has helped you out. But Nick, your bread looks wicked, man. Your bread looks really lovely. Keep doing what you're doing. There's very few occasions during the reading your emails and the filming of this video that I have looked at a loaf and gone, oh, that's bad. I mean, there's been a couple. But most of the time, you're along the right lines for one reason or another, whether it's the shape, whether it's the puff, or whatever it is. So appreciate and celebrate your wins, because there are some there. Chuck Darden. Let me first start by saying sourdough just seems like magic. Flour, salt, water, heat and time, and voila, tasty bread. Perhaps some love too. Yes, Chuck, you are definitely right. I've only ever been able to produce one tinier. The bread still tastes great to me. I don't use steam, afraid it might damage our oven, nor do I use a Dutch oven. Mostly lazy. I'd rather not clean another pot. Yeah, I know what you mean. Oh, and as you can see in the photo, the bread split outside the cut that I make. Bless you, Jack, you're a positive person. The world can't have too many of them. Let's have a look at your photo, Chuck. What was I saying a minute ago? Celebrate the wins. All right, let's celebrate the wins first. This is puffed up. Win. I can already see the problem. And it's not the bread. The bread is puffed up. The bread is a nice shape. It hasn't gone sideways. It hasn't flowed out into a pancake. It has burst up and risen up, not in the place you wanted it to, but it has risen. The problem, one of the problems here, is in what's underneath the bread. What we have here is a tray lined with parchment paper, which is all very wonderful, but stone baking on something hot and heavy, will always help your bread dough. The second thing I see is very minimal colour and a kind of duller colour that makes me feel like you're not baking with steam. And if you are baking with steam, you're not baking with enough steam, or your oven is kindly ejecting the steam for you somewhere, which is annoying. So maximise your steam. I'm talking about using a kettle of water and pouring it into a deep hot roasting tray after you've loaded your bread dough. It needs the steam. Without the steam, the outside skin forms and becomes dry, and then your loaf will just kind of bust out kind of randomly. Hot stone and steam is definitely what you need to help you out here. Yes, it's magic and it's so fun. Not without its challenges, but that's what makes it so special for all of us. Keep practicing, use the steam, get yourself a hot stone, or someone used a tile earlier. I don't know if they explode, do they? Probably not. You're on the right track. It looks nice. A few more, because this video is going to be long, isn't it? Blimey, are you still here? Are you still here? Hi Jack, couple of questions on sourdough September. Just wondering why I sometimes get 1. Extra large holes through my sourdough loaf. No good when you want to smother your toast with butter and homemade marmalade. 2. Air pocket under the crust in places. Boom, photos attached. Oh yeah, these look nice. This looks nice. A lot of people really want to get that open structure here. It's once again, another thing about building tension I think is the way to go. The cut, that halved loaf photo looks really, really nice inside. It doesn't look like it's fermented too much, perhaps flowed a little bit. I think the problem is on shaping this one. It's on consistent folding, appreciating the tension and being gentle with it, not making areas that are kind of lighter and more delicate than others. Practice, 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 Anita. Practice, 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 practice. I hope you're enjoying it because enjoyment will bring the practice. Brother Simeon is back. Hello, Brother Simeon. How are you? What would you say the 3 most important factors to achieve consistent oven spring when baking my sourdough? That is besides practice, practice, practice. That couldn't have happened at a better time, could it? All right, many things we've talked about today. Oven spring is the thing that people really want the most and are so disheartened when it doesn't happen, especially if it's been happening and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. It's about catching your dough at the right point during fermentation. Imagine, this is what I was talking about earlier. This ferments slowly, 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 quicker, 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 slows down, and then it just stops fermenting after a while. And the same thing happens in your bread dough. What you want to do is catch it at its, in theory, at its peak excitement within the dough. That is when it's making the most bubbles it possibly can, and the yeast population is multiplied to a point where it's just going crazy making bubbles. It's really hard to determine, and that comes with practice, practice, practice. So it's about recognizing the dough and getting it to its point where the puff is at its full potential. Also, steam is massive, and also stone baking is huge. The other thing that we have talked about is building that tension. Along the way, every time you're stretching and folding, keep those air bubbles in there and just strengthen your dough so it's able to hold more air bubbles, because it's the air bubbles that contribute, as well as the yeast making additional gas. It's the gas that's already inside of your dough that contributes. I think that was 4 things, Brother Simeon. But at this point in the video, my head's completely scrambled, and yours probably is as well, if you are in fact still here. I hope that helps you out. Mel Blunt is back. Okay, all right, Mel's got a lesson for us all. Let's go, Mel. You might remember I contacted you about a doughy middle to my sourdough. Yes, I do remember. I found the answer was that it was placed at the back of the fridge overnight near the element and froze. It was near the cold bit and it froze. On getting it out of the fridge before baking, it didn't have time to defrost while the oven heated up. I think this might be a useful example. Mel, what a discovery. So Mel had a doughy middle inside the finished sourdough loaf after it had baked, and discovered that the problem was it was too cold overnight. The dough actually froze and didn't actually defrost or bake through to the middle. That's why the middle was doughy. Mel, I remember, did you send me photographs? And I was like, I don't understand it. It should be baked through to the middle. And it was like 45 minute bake or something. I was saying, I don't know. It should have been baked. In theory, it would have been baked. There you go. There's the answer. It was actually frozen. Thanks for sharing that with us all, Mel. I think at the time that was a mystery to me, and now it's been solved. So thanks for sharing the solution. Appreciate that a lot. Marina, hi Jack. Hey, Marina Pegram's here. Hello, Marina. Hi Jack, hope you can help me. I follow your sourdough recipe all the time, but today's bake is a real disaster. Any hint or advice gratefully received. Just to show that I can do it usually, I've sent a pic of a lovely bake from last week. Thank you so much for the hard work and inspiration. You're welcome, Marina. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it a lot. Right, 2 photos. We've got 2 photos. One is the failed and one is the, this one's easy. I've got it already, I've cracked it. One is the failed bread and one is the regular bread that you're pleased with. Cool, your oven looks like it's hot, especially on the top. So the first thing, unrelated to this, is I would turn the oven down a little bit, or maybe after you've put your bread in, turn it down a little bit. So maybe if it's the electric one, the element doesn't ping on and scorch the top. You know what, I'm gonna talk about that after, a little bonus thing you can try after. But first, let's look at these. Here, we can see that the failed loaf has spread a lot. Not only has it spread a lot, but it's spilled off the edge of what I'm assuming that you baked on a stone. And where it has spread off the edge of the stone, there's this kind of rippled tear where a piece is almost falling off, which leads me to believe that this is fermented too much. It's had too much time or too much heat during the fermentation, and so it is starting to break down inside. I can't see the inside because there's no inside shot, but I guess when stuff starts fermenting too much, yeasts start losing their power, and also your dough starts losing its structure. It begins to break down, turning into that kind of scrambled egg, broken down texture. We did a video on that before, ages ago, years ago. That is what's happened here on that loaf on the left-hand side, because that bit kind of spilling off is a massive signal the structure's breaking down and there's no strength left. And that's why it's gone flat. So maybe it's too warm where you are, or you left it too long, or something. You messed up the timings by accident, which is easy to do. I do that quite a lot. And I'm like, oh, why is this gone funny? Oh, because I already did an extra fold by accident, an extra proving time. That's what's happened there. Catch it earlier next time. In your other loaves are looking good. They're puffing up, they're holding their shape nicely. What I do notice is that it's really dark on the top. This is what I wanted to tell you a minute ago. It's really dark on the top. A while ago, I did a very confusing video about turning the oven off after you've loaded the bread dough into the oven, because that helps the oven spring too. And since we're on a quest of oven spring here, this would be really helpful in your scenario. It looks like it's really hot on the top. That's what's dried out your cuts, and that's why they haven't bloomed. Here's something you might want to try. If your oven's nice and hot and your stone's nice and hot, in any bread that you're stone baking that you want to burst on the top, whether it's a sourdough or baguette or anything, slide your dough, make your cut, slide your dough onto the hot stone, steam up the oven to the max, and turn your oven off completely for 8 minutes, 10 minutes if you like to risk it. That will stop the element ding, from clicking on the top and drying the top out, and it will encourage your dough in the residual heat of the oven to rise up really, really big. It works really well for me in my oven, and it's definitely worth a try for you at home. Thank you so much for all your emails. Don't forget, if you're after sourdough stuff, we've just made a code up. Sourdough Sept 23, you can get 15% off sourdough stuff in the sourdough category at bakewithjack.co.uk/shop, shipping to you all over the globe. Thanks for this. Although I haven't individually answered every single email, for there are loads, I hope you got a load of value out of this. I tried to pick the most common things that have come up, the most things that are interlinked with one another, so we can all get a bit of value out of this. Thank you not only for your questions, but for your discoveries and for your learnings, because that's how we all truly learn, isn't it? Please comment with anything else that you think might be helpful to the other people that we haven't spoken about, or any of your own interesting learnings. And that was a marathon. I hope you enjoyed it. And this is Sourdough September. I've got a new sourdough starter on. This is the reason there's no sourdough content this year, because I've been off the game for ages. I've just made this. Oh, did you hear that? Woo! I've just made this and it's puffing up lovely. Good to go. I'm going to get back on that sourdough train as well. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks to patrons. Thanks to everyone for dropping super thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been really fun, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Bye-bye.